Hello and welcome to Jump To It. I'm Shane Anderson. On today's show, we'll be spending a lot of time focusing on one of the great weekends of world racing, and that is the Prix de Triomphe meeting, the big two-day festival coming from Paris Longchamp over Saturday and Sunday. Also, plenty of great racing to reflect on as I welcome in the team, Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley. Guys, what a weekend we had last weekend. Of course, that terrific card of racing, Stephen, at Newmarket, and also complemented by what was a really strong weekend of racing out of the Curragh. What was your standout performances, I suppose, from Newmarket?
Well, I think that the main thing, Shane, was that Aidan O'Brien's back. We've been banging on week after week on Jump To It how disappointing overall his horses have been. He's had a really below-par strike rate for most of the summer. But all of a sudden, they seem to be back with a vengeance. He's got some really nice horses. Tenebriism, of course, won the John Monty Cheveley Parks Filly Stakes in quite some style under Ryan Moore. I mean, they wouldn't have many 14-1 winners, but that was really impressive and didn't look a fluke. And, of course, Luxembourg over in Ireland looked absolutely top class. He could be anything. And he looks one to follow next season as he strengthens up and goes over long distances. But, yeah, it was a really good weekend of racing overall.
We'll dissect some of those races shortly as I welcome Ed to the program. Ed, I think Stephen makes a really good point. It could be quite ominous as we go to the Arc weekend and also the Champions meeting coming from Ascot in a few weeks' time. Aidan O'Brien is striking form at the right time with arguably the big powerhouse stable globally. He might be able to claw back to what Godolphin's been able to do.
Absolutely, Shane. Yeah, it had been a slow couple of months, hadn't it, for Aidan O'Brien relatively. We were kind of running up his strike rate, so we're in it like 3-4% through July and August. Very unusual times for Team Ballydor, but they really are back now, aren't they? Tenebriism was good. I mean, Luxembourg, we talked about the Beresford Stakes on last week's show, how excited we were about that horse, and I mean, he absolutely demolished the field, didn't he? He looks a serious individual. And my Oaks filly for next year at Concert Hall, totally outpaced, but she got the job done over the 7 furlongs. First off the bridle, but she was the strongest hit in the line. So that bodes well for middle distances next year. So yeah, Aidan O'Brien, after quite a couple of months relative to previous years at the same kind of time, has really just started to click as we head in towards October.
All right, guys, let's reflect on Newmarket. And Stephen, I'll start with you. Tenebriism, winning the Fillies Group 1 on the card, as you touched on earlier. It was a pretty impressive performance, powering through over the last furlong or so. We saw Perfect Power continue his great season by taking out the middle park for the Colts. Where do you think the strength is at the moment? Is it in the Fillies division in the 2-year-olds, or is it actually with the Colts?
I think it's mainly with the Colts. I mean, when Tenebriism came and won that race, Shane, it was one of those days at Newmarket when all of us punters thought we'd found a sort of golden highway up the stands rail. It looked like the sort of Red Sea parted for Moore, and he flew, and it was possibly on a really advantageous piece of the track. I suspect that is partly true, but then we saw later on the performance from Perfect Power, who's a real hard-knocking, progressive 2-year-old, and he had to do it the hard way, up the middle of the track, away from the stands rail. Maybe things got overplayed. All the jockeys decided to get to that rail, and it made things a bit easier for him to sort of come through late off a pace collapse up the middle. We must talk about, Shane, the race I got completely wrong. The Judd Monty Royal Lodge Stakes. Royal Patronage, a very game winner for Mark Johnson there. But the runner-up, Curragh, I think he could turn out to be the best horse we saw at Newmarket on Saturday. He was obviously traded at 1.01 on Betfair. I suspect if there could be a 1.00001 button, he'd have traded at that because he'd just won. I mean, he was weighed in. If you backed him, you'd stop watching the race. He looked like he was going by 7 or 8 lengths. I mean, how he got beat, it was absolutely extraordinary. But that being said, the turn of foot he showed, I think he's top class. And I think he was the horse I want to take out from the whole meeting, to be honest.
It was quite remarkable, Ed, as Stephen's highlighted. Curragh dashing 4-5 lengths clear, still with a significant margin over Royal Patronage coming inside the final furlong, yet he gets run down. I mean, you don't often see that in a racecourse, particularly in a feature race.
Yeah, indeed. I believe on the exchange was it £30,000 done at 101. Off to room 101 after that one. I mean, different. Lots of people get stuck into William Buick and he went too soon. Look, the horse was a bit fresh, a bit keen, and almost just tanked himself to the front, didn't he? Before looked like the race was over in a matter of strides, and then got caught. Definitely, I agree with Stephen. The horse to take forward into next year. I think they might try and, as the horse matures, adapt to kind of more patient tactics and trying to utilise that turn of foot at the end of the races. And definitely wouldn't be giving up on that horse. But Perfect Power is the horse, Shane, who perhaps because it's trained by Richard Fahey and not Aidan O'Brien or John Gosden, perhaps doesn't quite get the credit he deserves. His CV is really starting to stack up now, isn't it? He's tough. Whether he'll train on as a 3-year-old, to use that cliche, we don't quite know. But he'll be a perfect prospect for the businessmen and women involved at stud, shall we say, if they decide to draw stumps anytime soon with that horse, because they really have had a flying campaign. Royal Ascot wins, Goodwood, and now landing in the middle part. Real tough, real battler, and was given a pretty good ride by Christophe Soumillon as well, it has to be said. So, that was those two were definitely the two to take out of Newmarket, in my view.
Just a question on the big handicap race to both of you, the Cambridgeshire over a mile and 1 furlong. Now, Jamie Spencer, who I actually really like Jamie Spencer. He's a jockey who makes you, from a punting perspective, often pull out your hair in frustration because he's always sitting out the back, sitting quietly. But the way he was able to present Bedouin's story through the field and win running away for Saeed bin Saror and Godolphin, it was a massive price win, Stephen, but it was pretty impressive on the day.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary performance, wasn't it? Almost last to first. But it's typical Jamie Spencer show. I mean, I am not a fan. I mean, I watch a lot of midweek racing. I think he's been half a gone jockey for 10 years, if I'm being brutally honest. I'm being polite saying that. He's extremely one-dimensional. The only time he ever goes off the front is if the cash is down on the all-weather and he makes all the running. He seems determined to sit last. It doesn't matter whether they're going too fast, too slow. He sits out of his ground in last. And once every 3 weeks, there's a huge pace collapse. He comes through and all the judges on Twitter are lauding him as though he's the best jockey ever. Not for me under any circumstances, but big field handicaps on straight courses, he has got a very good record. He's got an amazing record at Ascot, over a mile, in fact, where the cards, they go for home too soon from halfway and they do stop on a regular basis. But I think if you were backing him, you'd be watching this programme sitting in the dark with a candle for warmth on a regular basis.
Ed, it was interesting with Jamie. Apparently he was on the gallops and he saw Saeed bin Saror and said, I'm still alive, give me a chance, put me on one of your horses. And Saeed actually had a really good weekend. Not only did he win the Cambridgeshire for Godolphin, but also his wonderful international globetrotter Ben Battle was also back to winning ways, taking out the Joel Stakes. And he looks to be, even though he's now, I think, a 7-year-old, he certainly looks to be in fine fettle as well.
Yeah, the old Godolphin resurgence, haven't we? We talked about Charlie Appleby kick-started it. Saeed bin Saror had been somewhat in his shadow for the last 2 or 3 years, but Saeed bin Saror's got some nice horses coming to the fore now. Obviously, Bedouin Stories managed to land a huge prize in the Cambridgeshire. Real World we've talked about on previous shows. And Ben Battle is the interesting one. It sounds like he's going to roll the dice in the QE2 now as well, doesn't it? So, as I said, we've got the boys in blue have been having a wonderful season. Ballydoyle been slow for the most part, other than a couple of leading lights. So they seem to be clicking. It all just seems to be kind of mushroom clouding beautifully towards the final kind of part of the flat season. And Godolphin just going from strength to strength, it has to be said.
Stephen, let's switch our attention to the Curragh. And of course, we had a really important race, and that was the Group 2 Beresford Stakes for the 2-year-olds over a mile. And an unbelievable performance by the Aidan O'Brien trade in Luxembourg, a son of Camelot. That was just a breathtaking win. The way that he accelerated inside that final 2 furlongs to put the race to bed in a matter of strides, win easily. He's now being promoted as perhaps the favourite for the Derby in a lot of markets at the moment for next season. Do you think he could be the one to beat?
Well, I mean, visually, he was incredibly impressive. I suppose, if you're going to be an old misery that I normally am, the second in Swan Bay was really disappointing. So what did he beat? And also, he was sent to Killarney for his debut, which wouldn't be Aidan O'Brien's usual stomping ground for top-class horses. But that being said, I mean, this was probably the most impressive performance. He's gone past sort of Point Lonsdale in the pecking order there, I would think. The turn of foot to hit the front, I mean, it was virtually a furlong out, wasn't it? And to put 4 3/4 lengths between him and the rest of the field in such a short space of time, in a true run race, it looked a proper performance. Probably the most impressive 2-year-old performance we've seen this season. I'm not surprised that he's going to be the big talking horse over the winter now. I suspect he's number 1 in their pecking order.
Ed, based on what you saw on the weekend, I know that you were fairly positive about him as a horse that could make significant inroads. But are you a true believer? Is based on what you saw on Saturday, making him at the top of the tree going to the big classic races for 3-year-olds next season?
Far too early to tell in that sense, but of what I've seen, it's hard to argue who you'd have ahead of him at this stage, you see what I'm saying, in regards to next season's kind of middle distance picture. I see, yeah, he's around an 8-1 shot to win the Derby. Not for me this far in advance, but it really did make you sit up and take note, didn't he? He kind of came out swinging on the bridle. And they all say, I think it was Henry Cecil said, the really top horses quicken twice. And that was the guy, I know this is at a relatively lowly level compared to some of the greats which we saw from that master trainer, but he kind of quickened to join them and then went away again. And it just looked full of running. I mean, the jockey was trying to pull him up at the line. It was really impressive performance. Obviously, his sire won the Derby. He's from a whole host of kind of middle distance performers in his pedigree. Next season, 10 furlongs, up to 1.5 miles. Yeah, you wouldn't be shocked at all to see him in the Dante or something like that back in May. And so, yeah, really exciting prospect, Luxembourg. And thoroughly deserves the plaudits he's getting on the back of that performance.
Guys, we're going to spend a fair bit of time on today's show focusing on Paris Longchamp and the Arc in its as the main talking point for the weekend on what is going to be just a brilliant 2 days of racing. But I suppose, Stephen, as an overall assessment of the Arc field this year, I actually think it could be one of the strongest Group 1 races we've seen for a long period of time. In my mind, it's probably the best Arc since See the Stars won in 2009. 15 horses to face the starter. We've got the best of the 3-year-old division. We've got some great older horses. We've got some international competitors. It really ticks a lot of boxes.
Absolutely, Shane. I mean, we're sort of hard. We watch a lot of racing, don't we, 7 days a week? But this is one we really are looking forward to. I mean, we've got 1 from Germany, 2 from Japan, 4 from Ireland, 4 from France, 4 from Great Britain. It's a fantastic, I guess, all your Dancing Brave flashbacks, because we've got the Oaks, the Derby winner, the Ledger winner, the Breeders' Cup Turf winner. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. It's going to be a brilliant race. Let's hope. I mean, the one slight negative that could spoil things, it sounds like it could easily be a sort of Red Marauder Grand National style heavy ground slog. The forecast in Paris over the Saturday and Sunday looks absolutely horrendous. I mean, it looks bad enough here. It looks like it's going to rain for about 14 days, and it's much the same in France. So that could make things a real slog. We've lost Tiona because of that. I mean, I think she'd have been particularly hard to fancy in truth anyway, but it's certainly giving it a different complexion. I would imagine it could be sort of last man standing if they go a proper gallop, which I suspect Broome is in the race to give us. I think they're going to go a proper gallop.
And Broome will be ridden by Yutake Take, one of the great Japanese riders who's actually linking up with Aidan O'Brien and Coolmore for that race. Ed, your just general view, knowing that we will talk in more detail about the Arc later, but it really doesn't look to be missing anything. It's ticks, as I said earlier, it ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, been getting me very excited for a while, this race, Shane, isn't it? All the suspects you want there, your classic performers, your older horse, the filly Tarnara, of course, ran a very nice trial, if you want for a better phrase, in the Irish Champion behind St. Mark's Basilica last time out. You got Hurricane Lane arriving here on the back of winning a Ledger, and it's really exciting stuff. The Derby winner in there too. Interesting what Stephen says about the weather. I remember going back, it's probably 9 years ago, or 8 or 9 years ago now, when Orfev, the great Japanese horse, could not lose, according to at least 3/4 of Japan. And then for about 3 days before the art meeting, absolutely deluged. And some filly called Solomir, I don't think I'd heard of even after she won the race, just came and absolutely mugged Orfev. And the ground was like absolute treacle. So that can be a recipe for a little bit of a boil over, but it just does look so chocked full of quality, this assignment, that I'm just really looking forward to this, Shane. This should be an absolute, a stunning Arc de Triomphe.
Yeah, looking forward to getting the insights from both of you as to who you like in the race. And seeing that you do mention Orfev, there is some amazing footage that goes around on social media and also YouTube of the Japanese fans cheering him on, thinking he's all home and taking the great race back to Japan for the first time. And then the look and shock on their faces when he's beaten it is actually quite amusing. All right, guys, let's talk about St. Mark's Basilica. Ed just referenced him then, Stephen. The news has come through that Coolmore and Aidan O'Brien have said that he won't race on. He will be retired to stud. It's fascinating. He's an outstanding horse. I mean, he was a Group 1 winner as a 2-year-old. Come back, he's been a multiple Group 1 winner as a 3-year-old. He's won French Classics. He's beaten the older horses on 2 occasions. You'd love him back for another season, Stephen, just from a racing fan perspective. But, I mean, what? He could earn maybe £5 million on the track next year if he wins all of the races. At stud, he's probably going to earn £50 million.
That's the problem, Shane, isn't it? I mean, he's been a brilliantly tough and progressive, genuine horse with a great attitude. 6 wins from 9 races. I mean, it's pretty thin gruel. I mean, flat fans do get used to this. It's not like the jumps where we get sort of 4, 5, 6 years of these horses, get to know them. They come and have 4 or 5 runs a season, and you follow them year to year. It is quite a fleeting experience. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed, really. I think he'd have been a really good horse to race on next season. I mean, it's not like these people need the money. Let's be truthful. I think as fans of the sport, it would have been better if he'd carried on racing. I think there's still more to come with him. They haven't got to the bottom of him stamina-wise, and his attitude when he beat Tanawa was absolutely fantastic, although albeit he drifted right across the track, of course, but he put his head down to see them both off. So, yeah, I mean, he's earned $2.5 million in his career so far. As you say, I'm sure he could have doubled that next season because it'd have been extremely hard to beat. So I think it's a bit of a shame, personally.
Stephen, before I move on to Ed, though, quick question. Is St Mark's Basilica, based on what you've seen on the track and what his CV stands for now, an all-time great, a real top-class Group 1 winner? Or is he just a very good horse who was able to have a rampaging 12 months on the track?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect that this is not, if I'm being honest, a vintage year. I think there's not that much between all of them. And he was probably the most genuine and straightforward for pressure in a finish. I think it's inches and millimetres. I mean, time form, which I use, I think he's something like 11th in the all-time greats, isn't he? Behind Giant's Causeway and all the rest of them. So, no would be my answer to that, Shane.
All right, Ed, I'll pose the same question to you. Where do you think he stands in the pantheon of top-class horses, particularly from a Coolmore perspective, those that they've raced over the last 20-odd years with Aidan O'Brien at the helm? Is he right at the top, or is he just a very good horse who struck a good year to do what he's done?
Well, probably both, Shane. I mean, yes, he is, and what he's achieved, he has to be right up there. The problem is he's had his season curtailed in the kind of the defining race. For example, if he got to the Champion Stakes and bolted up by 8 lengths there, that would have really kind of crowned him, if you like. It's almost a case of just unfinished business with him, isn't it? It's frustrating for all involved. I totally understand the kind of stud value and stud angle and putting him away and everything, but it would have been great to see him back on the track as a 4-year-old. So, yeah, he has to be up there with the best Ballydor have trained, but to put him up to the kind of elevated lights, he's missing that maybe 1 or 2 more stellar performances, which really would jump him to the head of affairs. But look, he won the Champ Stakes in great fashion. I mean, his Eclipse performance was brilliant, where he tanked round and then quick and clear in a manner of, very good horse away from some top class performance. Mishriff's no mug, and he made him look extremely average on that day. So look, yeah, a very, very good horse. I feel it would have needed 1 or 2 more absolute stellar performances to put him right up with the very best.
On last week's show, I talked to you both about finding some early jump season standouts. So you were tasked with finding 3 horses to follow for the season ahead before we get into the serious pieces of form. So, Stephen, who have you settled on? Who are the 3 we need to follow from your perspective when it comes to the National Hunt season coming up?
Right, Shane, I've got 3. One of them's for now, 2 of them are for later. The one for now, i.e. in the next few weeks and months, is Impulsive One, who's a Nicky Henderson juvenile hurdler. I went to Plumpton last Sunday, the first time I've got out of this chair for about 6 months to go racing. Absolutely fantastic, massive crowd at Plumpton. Obviously, poured with rain all day. Car got stuck in the mud in the middle of the usual Plumpton fun and games. But it was a really good card, actually. An Impulsive One in a very strongly run juvenile hurdle jumped superbly, which is typical of Henderson. And that is going to count for plenty in the coming weeks. These juvenile hurdles until about November are extremely weak. And if you can jump and you stay, you can run up a sequence. And I think Impulsive One is probably an extremely useful horse of Henderson's to follow over the next few weeks in juvenile hurdles. I don't think you'll see him beaten, certainly until the bigger stables, well, not the bigger stables, other runners from the top yards come out and take him on much heavier ground. He's owned by the Muniers. I think he's a very useful horse for the time of year. The other 2 are slightly less secret. They're both going to be top-class novice hurdlers, hopefully. I Am Maximus, trained by Nicky Henderson. He's had 1 run in a Cheltenham bumper. He beat a horse called My Drogo, who by coincidence is my 3rd horse to follow in a minute. I'm told by my Henderson man, in inverted commas, that I Am Maximus is their supreme novice horse. He's schooling superbly. He's an absolute machine, and he's one to keep on site. I don't think you'll see him beaten before Cheltenham anyway, if things go as planned. And my Drogo, my friend's got horses with Dan Skelton. Dan's got 140 horses this season, with 40 more to come. By the way, he's going to be one of the biggest yards in the whole of the training ranks in the country. He's only had a handful of runners in the last 3 months. They've completely changed their modus operandi. It's no longer going to be summer. It's going to be winter horses. My Drogo is just about the best of the lot. He's 4 from 4 over hurdles. He's a proper machine. He's going to be aimed at all the top races and then go over fences next year, I believe. So he's very much one to keep on side of.
All right, 3 solid selections there. I'm Impulsive One for the near future. I Am Maximus and My Drogo there from Stephen. All right, Ed, who have you settled on from your 3 to follow for the season ahead?
Yeah, Shane, there'd be 3 more established horses, if you like. Well, one of them anyway. The first one would be Thomas Darby, trained by Ollie Murphy. I'm taking a kind of longer-term anti-post view of a lot of these. This is a horse who's training. He's 66 to 1 for the Stayers Hurdle at the moment, next March, which is a kind of price which definitely ticks a lot of boxes for me. This is a horse who last year, Ollie Murphy said himself, he was trying to work out what his best trip was. And they were kind of and ahhing whether it was 2.5, maybe a bit short, a bit further. In the end, cut long story short, they stepped him up for 3 miles for the first time in the entry grade 1. He ran really well when finishing 3rd behind Time Hill, kind of be the standard bearer, if you like, for the staying division this side of the sea, at least anyway. And he was ridden that day with the kind of view, we're not sure whether we get the trip or not, but he clearly did on the back of that. And I think that's offered lots of encouragement basically going further forward. I think it's a pretty wide open division. It seems to be a little bit of the case now. Paisley Park's perhaps slightly past his best. That a lot of them just keep beating each other. And I do think this is a horse who's totally unexposed at the trip. It's got to improve about another £8 or £10 to be a Stayers Hurdle horse, but who's to say he can, given that he's, as I said, he's totally unexposed over that distance. It sounds like, listening to trainer quotes, he's going to have an early season crack at Time Hill in the West Yorkshire Hurdle in 4 weeks at Wetherby, which will be an interesting one, taking on the anti-post market leader there. And he's only got to ruffle up the Philip Hobbs horse, or at least get close to him. No, I don't think those quotes of 66 to 1 will last for much longer. So he's a kind of long-term view. I think he's a big price going further forward. And then we've got 2 others from who were novice chasers last year with considerable ability. Number 1 is the Big Breakaway, who trained by Team Tizard. Of course, Colin retires at the end of October and his licence gets handed over to his son Joe. And this is a horse I think has got immense ability. Looked really smart to start last season. Of course, he bolted up by 10 lengths at Cheltenham in a novice chase and then was runner-up in a grade 1 at the Christmas period at Kempton. And then the wheels kind of came off a little bit, has to be said. At the Cheltenham Festival behind Monkfish, he was well beaten ultimately and then ran no race at all, went over the hill at Aintree. I've just got a feeling, Shane, they might, listening to kind of trying to read between the lines on the quotes coming out the yard, they may just drop this horse back in trip and let him rip. He's got some lot of form days, over 2.5 on soft. He's been eased and marker 146. I've got him at the top of my shortlist for the Paddy Power Gold Cup at Cheltenham in November at the moment. I think that'd be the ideal race for him there. So there's no market for that race at the moment, but he's definitely one to keep in your notebooks because I'm sure there's a big handicap to be won. And finally, one for Irish racing fans, Irish viewers here. A horse who, funny enough, ran in the same race as the Big Breakaway at the Cheltenham Festival in the 3-mile novice chase there. Eclat de Rire, or Rire, I don't quite know how to pronounce it. My French is not quite as good as Stephen, so I'm sure he can correct me in a minute. This horse, a really interesting one for Henry de Bromhead, who he was absolutely tanking. He was still a long way out, but he was jumping and travelling very nicely in the race won by Monkfish. Just go and watch that contest back before departing and throwing Rachel Blackmore out the saddle. Been left on 152. I think this is a horse that's definitely got a big handicap win in the locker. It sounds like the vibes come out of the all-conquering Henry de Bromhead team is that they're going to think about the Labrix Trophy, the old Hennessy as it used to be over here. 3.25 miles, Newbury, soft ground off 152. Looks absolutely tailor-made as in a race, of course, which traditionally kind of second season novices do really well in. So yeah, Eclat de Rire wouldn't be at all surprised. Again, I think he's around 66 to 1 for the Cheltenham Gold Cup. He'd be wouldn't be shocked if he was a left of field selection that came through into the picture. So yeah, Thomas Darby for the Stayers kind of angle, and the Eclat de Rire and the Big Breakaway, 2 kind of second season novices I think could have big seasons, has to be said.
All right, 3 nice selections there, particularly for long-range plays for some of the bigger races from Ed. And Ed, you do have an update on a couple of key jumps racing contenders who we're likely to see step out over the next few days.
Yeah, indeed, Shane. As I've all the Arc de Triomphe going on, and Sun Chariots and Ascot. I mean, it's hard to forget. Yeah, we're getting into jump season now, and the Queen Mother Champion Chase winner, of course, Put the Kettle On, makes a seasonal reappearance at Gorham Park at the weekend over 2.5 miles. I think this will be a bit of a ring rust removal. I would not be panicking if she gets turned over here. I think there are bigger targets ahead. They're going to look at perhaps the Schlur Chase at Cheltenham in November. And, of course, she's unbeaten at Cheltenham, has an unblemished record there. But, yeah, Queen Mother Champion Chase winner is back at the weekend. And on Sunday, sounds like multiple Grade 1 winner Abracadabras is back as well at Tipperary, I believe, in a Grade 3. So, yeah, all the talk of the flat. But we've got to keep our eye on the jumps as well, Shane, because the Irish jump racing scene is really starting to get going in earnest. So, yeah, lots to look forward to, it has to be said.
All right, great work there, Ed. And, of course, you can head to irishracing.com, get all the latest news, cards and information, not only for jumps racing, but also flat racing, with so many great races coming up this weekend. And, in fact, it's now time to focus on the upcoming races. And, gents, I think we're going to spend most of today talking about the big races coming up in France, because the Prix de Triomphe meeting, the 2-day event coming from Paris Longchamp, really is the centre point of all things global racing. Now, on Saturday, we've got a fascinating race. The big highlight staying race is the Prix de Cadran, which is over 2 miles, 4 furlongs, 4,000 metres. And it's a race that we see so many different form lines converge, because we'll have the top-class Irish stayers, the top-class English stayers, as well as the top-class French stayers. Let's have a look at what we can expect taking their place in the field. Of course, Stratum for Willie Mullins. Christian De Muro will take the ride. Emperor of the Sun for Doniker O'Brien, I should say. Gavin Ryan to take the ride. Max Lafrepoix for the French team. Caristad will also be in the field, another French runner. Cacophonous is also there, another French runner. Scazino will take the place in the field. Michael Barcelona to take the ride. Now, the mighty champion Stradivarius has accepted for the race. Frankie Dettori to take the ride for John and Thady Gosden. Alcuin is there. Eddie Hardouin to take the ride. Trushan, great to see Trushan take his place in the field too. James Doyle riding. Olivier Pellier will ride Call the Wind. Memphis, the German stayer, is there. Princess Zoe, who won the race last year, one of the great stories of racing, her performances over the last 12 months for the Mullins camp. And Bubble Smart for the team of Mikel Dalzong and Jared Mosse. Of course, both Michael and Jared have won Melbourne Cups in Australia. Bubble Smart, an emerging 4-year-old. That's a great field, I think. 13 runners to face the starter for the Prix de Cadran on Saturday. The big highlight race, Stephen. Who do you like?
I think it's a match, Shane, between Stradivarius, who I'm not sure I want to take a short price about these days, and Princess Zoe, who's been there, done it, got the T-shirt, loves testing ground, stays forever, and it is sure to take an awful lot of beating. I think if they end up betting sort of 5-4, 4-1 bar, which looks possible, each way Princess Zoe is one of the best bets of the weekend. I think she's got everything in her favour, to be honest. She's been trained for this race. Whereas Stradivarius perhaps has had a couple of hard races. He was very impressive the other day, didn't come off the bridle, but perhaps on a couple of occasions previously, he's looked like he might just be not quite the force of old. And Gosden's always said he doesn't really want heavy ground. I mean, I think that's nonsense, personally. He's won at Ascot on really testing ground over this trip, so that's not a problem. The one I don't like, the weak link in the chain that we're always talking about on this programme, which encourages you to have a bet, is Trushan. I don't think Trushan will stay 2 mile 4. He's a hard puller. Holly Doyle gets on particularly well, getting him relaxed and all the rest of it to come through late. And he's never been beyond 2 miles. So 2 mile 4 for me. I think that could really find Trushan out on properly heavy ground. I know he wants heavy ground to be seen at his best effect, but it's 4 furlongs further. It's a long way, and he hasn't got proven stamina at all. I think I'll be laying Trushan a place and backing Princess Zoe each way if we get 4-1 or bigger.
All right, Princess Zoe, 4-1 or bigger. Lay Trushan for the Prix de Cadran from Stephen. Ed, are you with Stradivarius or are you going elsewhere?
I don't know what I'm with in this, to be honest with you, Shane. I agree. In fact, I don't see an upset in here. I think it's between the protagonists. I think between the top 3. Stradivarius, You feel old Father Time's got to catch up with him at some point. I thought there were question marks. Perhaps he was coming to the end early on in the season, but just keeps pulling it out the fire, doesn't he, really? Thing is, yes, he's got 4 months off, but I don't think he really want this to turn into an absolute punch-up over 2.5 in a bog. It would kind of diminish his class angle to some extent, and Princess Zoe, she absolutely revels in the mud, doesn't she? So obviously we saw this race 12 months ago, how comfortable she was in the surroundings. Trushan is the enigma, given that everything will be right for this horse. The ground, just 2.5 miles, will the old petrol gauge come on? I watched back the Goodwood run last time out, where, let's be blunt, I mean, Trushan absolutely bolted up, but through the first half mile of that race was pulling Holly Doyle's arms out. Will not be able to get away with that over 2.5 in an Amazonian swamp at the weekend. So, all in all, I don't know. My heart would want Stradivarius to absolutely pulverise the field here. My head kind of says Princess Zoe. Trushan, I don't quite know what to make of, because if James Doyle can get Trushan switched off, ground conditions, you argue, you can be absolutely spot on for the Alan King runner. So, yeah, a muddling affair, but nonetheless, a very good one.
Yeah, quite interesting that Holly Doyle hasn't been able to get over to take the ride on Trushan, as you mentioned. So James Doyle will take the ride for Alan King. Brilliant day of racing on the Saturday, because outside of the Prix de Cadran, there's also the Group 1 Prix de Royal for the fillies and mares over a mile 6, plus 3 other Grade 2 races or Group 2 races on the card. Let's switch our attention now to Sunday, the big day at Paris Longchamp, and of course, it's highlighted by one of the world's great races, the Qatar Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, over 1.5 miles, 2,400 metres. And what a field. We've got 15 are facing the starter for this magnificent contest, which really will be one of the true highlights of the year. All right, let's have a look at the makeup of the field for the Prix d'Arc de Triomphe. And we've got Torquator Tasso, the German galloper, in the field. Deep Bond, the Japanese bred galloper, Mikel Barcelona, taking the ride. Broome is there, as I mentioned earlier. Yatake Take taking the ride for Aidan O'Brien. Tanawa for Dermot Well, Christophe Soumillon in the saddle. Love, can she bounce back to winning form? Frankie Dettori riding for Aidan O'Brien. Rabinar is also there, Christian Demuro in the saddle. Chronogenesis, the star Japanese mare, Asheen Murphy in the saddle. Probably wants a firmer track than likely to get this weekend. Mojo Star, who's been runner-up in the St Ledger and also the Derby, Ross Orion taking the ride. Baby riders there, Eretzman Desable. We've got Adiyar, the Derby champion, William Buick in the saddle for Charlie Appleby. The St Ledger hero and three-time Group 1 winner, Hurricane Lanes there, James Doyle taking the ride. Seal Away for Frank Blondell. Tom Marquand riding Alan Kerr. Bubble Gift is in the field, Gerard Mosse taking the ride. And, of course, Snowfall, the brilliant dual Oaks winner. Of course, sensationally beaten as a short price favourite last start, Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore. Well, it really is, Stephen, a phenomenal field. 15 of the best horses in the world facing the starter. Who are you settling on?
I think you've got to play prices, Shane. I think Snowfall at 6-1 is a really solid each-way bet. She's bound to give her a running. She stays the trip really well. They should go a really strong gallop, which will suit her, and she'll be finishing full of running. Moore's booked for her. They got rid of Dettori after his aberration last time out. I'm confident she'll run really well. And the best of the rags, I think we agree on this, Mojo Star, who's 50-1, got trap 1, plot draw, back him each way as well. I think he's overpriced. Put it this way, if Hurricane Lane's 5-1, Mojo can't be 50. There's no way in the world there's that much disparity between them, particularly on soft ground, which Mojo handles particularly well. So they're my two that I fancy. I massively respect Tanawa, but I think she's that short because everyone's seen her be an unlucky loser, probably of the race against St Mark's Basilica in the Irish Champion Stakes. I think she's too short on her overall form because of that factor. Adayar has got a very difficult draw. Buick will have to make a decision early on what he's going to do, whether he's going to come across and be aggressive or whether he's going to ride for luck and drop in. That's not an ideal draw for Adayar. I think he's got standout form claims. I think he's achieved more than Tanawa, but the draw is a negative. Hurricane Lane, Ed's horse, who he tipped us all for the St Ledger at 10-1. I think he's a tough, relentless, thorough galloper who's bound to give his running. He's a big runner. But I do think that Snowfall at the prices is the one to side with. The one I can't have, Shane, I was rather hoping you'd tip it so we could have a proper tear-up about it, is Chrono Genesis, who's been tipped by all the sort of racing hipsters, the ones who like to appear clever because they think they know about Japanese form, and it looks quite sort of multicultural, isn't it? It might be wonderful if Japan could win it and all the rest of it. Chrono Genesis has got firm ground form only. I mean, he might well revel in heavy ground at Longchamp, but it would be some sort of transformation from what he's been achieving. It's impossible. He's got one line of form with Mishriff that probably isn't good enough either. Not for me. He's the worst price, under 10-1, I think I've ever seen in the Arc de Triomphe. I'll be laying him a place. Not for me under any circumstances.
All right, so you're anti-Chronogenesis, you're very positive Snowfall, and you're also giving a good push for Mojo Star. I think Chronogenesis is actually going to run quite well. May not win the race, Stephen. So I'm just pushing your buttons at the moment, but I won't go any further because we need the insights of Ed. Who are you settling on for the Arc?
Yeah, great race, Shane. That's what you've been billing it up for a long time. This really is a cracker. I'm with Stephen here with Snowfall at the prices. Let's not forget the thing we haven't mentioned, which we often harp on about on previous shows, is she gets the fillies and the weight for age. I think that could be quite a big pool in it. Filly's got a decent record in the Arc, obviously, and I mean, officially, it's kind of she's been winning on a good to soft. But I mean, when she won the Oaks by the record margin, 16 lengths, kind of all the jockeys were saying it's proper soft ground there. So I know a few people are a little bit worried if it does come up genuinely heavy. Will she handle it? That would be a slight concern. But other than that, I think she's a class act. Got in a bit of a messy contest last time out where perhaps Frankie Dettori rode with a little bit too much confidence, shall we say. Look, I think at the prices, given that she's 2.5 times the price of Tarnawa, for example, I think she's the value pick with a weight for age. I think she'll handle the ground. The trip's no problem, and she's looked a class act all apart from one performance this season. So she'd be the one at the top of the market. I mean, you can make a case of the ball, which is what makes it so exciting. But from a price perspective, she's one that makes appeal. If there was a roughie, to use your word, Shane, I know Stephen throwed in Mojo Star, and I can understand that. William Haggis's horse here with Tom Marcon's going to ride Lenkwa, just very effective individual when the mud is flying. One at Royal Ascot in the Group 2 on heavy. One is racecourse debut at Newbury when you could barely see the race because there was mud all over the camera. Comes alive on a very soft surface. At York last time out over 10 furlongs, looked outpaced behind Mishriff in the Judmont before getting going a bit too late. Back to 1.5 miles. I think this one's around 40-1 again. Wouldn't be shocked if the horse ran on into third. I finished third, funny enough, behind Hurricane Lane in France a few starts ago. So that would be one. I think he'll be there to kind of pick up the pieces in the mud, if you like. And if the William Haggis runner stayed on into third at 40-1, I wouldn't be surprised. But Snowfall for me. Ryan Moore on board. I think the filly can get the job done.
All right, really interesting. You both have settled on this outstanding 3-year-old filly Snowfall to take the Arc against her, fellow 3-year-old Star Colts, but also older horses. It's going to be a great race, the Arc, on Sunday. Make sure you tune in if you can. All right, let's go to some of the other great races on the program on Sunday, and we'll start with race 1, or the first of the Group 1s, I should say, and that's the Qatar Prix Marcel Boussac, or the fillies, 2-year-old fillies mile feature, and a really good field being assembled here. 9 to face a starter. We've got the unbeaten Raclette for Andre Fabre. Will take her place in the race. Zelly is also expected to be there. Times Square is also likely to place herself in the race. Fleur de Iris is there for Godolphin, again, an Andre Fabre trained runner. Agartha for Joseph O'Brien. Akerali is in the field. We're also going to see Oscula for George Bowie. John and Thady Gosden have got Natasha for prominent owner George Strawbridge. Who Knows is in the field as well. And then we go down, and that is in fact the final horse to touch on Who Knows. So a field of 9 there for the fillies feature. Stephen, do you have an early tip for the 2-year-olds?
Well, I think the one certainty is that Agartha's liable to go off in front quite hard. She's a really tough, improving front runner. I've got doubts she'll stay a mile at this stage of her career, though. All her form's at 7, and most of it's on better ground. I think that Raclette, which, Shane, you might be interested to know. You won't be interested to know, but I'm going to tell you anyway.
I'll pretend I'm interested, Stephen.
It's a French cheese that they use in sort of fondue nights in France. Now, that's about the extent of my French knowledge and language skills as well. But Raclette looks a really useful filly for André Fabre. The stable's going well. He's had 5 winners in the last 14 days, had a good strike rate, about 18%. She's been really impressive, 2 from 2. She handles the ground. She's going to get a good pace to make aim at, and I think they'll be disappointed if she's beaten. She's held in very high regard at home.
Yeah, big raps on Raclette for Stephen's cheese and wine night. Ed, are you siding with her, or have you found one at a bigger price?
Yeah, well, obviously, Stephen will be cheesed off if she gets beat, but couldn't resist. But a total get up in my view. I see Team Gosden are going to run Natasha. So 2 absolutely nothing races, one on the all-weather, I think it was 1-4 or something at Sandown last time out. Absolute guess up as to her overall kind of level of form and how she'll handle this surface, where if it does get properly deep, and the mud does start flying, that's going to be a world away from what she's faced. But nonetheless, is a beautifully bred sort, and you'd think is on the upward curve. So, yeah, tricky one for me, and no bet. But Raclette seems to a lot of hype with her, and so far she's been delivering on the track. And also, another final thing you should say as well is I do worry at the back end of this season, sometimes these 2-year-old fillies, having a hard race in the mud here, just the kind of accumulative effect of a long season just take its toll, and it's one race too many. In regards to Raclette, she's only had the 2 starts. She's pretty fresh in comparison to a few others that are in here. So I think she'll be tip-top and tailor-made for this. And Raclette does look to be the one to be with.
All right, good push there. I should highlight, I should have mentioned this earlier, the only race at the time of filming this show that has been finalised for Sunday is the Arc de Triomphe. So we still are waiting on confirmation fields. So make sure you head to your appropriate form references to get the full field soon. Let's move on to the next of the Group 1s. And this again for the 2-year-old for the Colts. It's over a shorter trip, 7 furlongs, and it is the Prix Jean-Luc Lagardere. And this has currently 9 horses expected to take their place in the field. Ebro River certainly looks very hard to beat here for Hugo Palmer. Stone Age for Aidan O'Brien's down to run. Excuse me, Angle Bleu for Ralph Beckett. Noble Truth for Charlie Appleby and Godolphin. The Wizard of Eye for John Moore. Arnis Master is also expected to take a place at the big price. Another one that's unbeaten is Roccagiani. 2 from 2. Ancient Rome is there for Andre Fabre, and also Akakaba, another one to take her place, or take his place, I should say. No, her place. It's a filly. 4 from 4 currently. So 9 to face their starter. Forgive me for a bit of a mistake on that occasion there, but it does look to be a really interesting contest for the 2-year-olds over 7 furlongs.
Yeah, I thought this was tricky, Shane. Ebro River, I'm not sure he'll stay on heavy ground over 7 furlongs. He tried 7 in Ireland last time. That form reads brilliantly, of course, with Native Trail sluicing up. But I don't think Ebro River got home on good ground at the Curragh, and I don't think he'll get home on heavy ground at Longchamp. So I think, although he's top of the ratings, a couple might improve past him. Ancient Rome, who's owned by Tabor, one of the rare horses he has with Fabre. You'd massively respect that one if they choose to run here. But the one I've gone for, a token selection, Akababa, down the bottom, 4 from 4. She's only won her last 2 races by about an inch, and she's been under pressure a long way out each time. But she's got an amazing attitude watching the videos this morning. I think she probably only just does enough in front, but she's very game and genuine, pulls it out. She stays well. She goes well in heavy ground. I'm sure she'll give her running, but it doesn't look a great betting race, this one.
All right, questionable betting option, though. We'll see what happens with that field when it finally takes shape. Ed, your view?
Very interested in this. Listen to Hugo Palmer recently gave a bulletin on Ebro River where he says he felt Ebro River did not quite get home over the 7 at Curragh. But when questioned, well, then why would you run Ebro River here? He was saying, well, the Curragh is probably the stiffest 7 furlongs in the world in terms of the amount of stamina it places on you, whereas 7 furlongs at Longchamp is a lot easier. However, it then just kind of throw the spanner in the works when you could be running an absolute treacle here. And I just wonder, I tend to agree with Stephen here, I just wonder if the old petrol gauge will come on at the 6.5 furlong marker with Ebro River. I think six furlongs on soft be absolutely perfect. I like Ancient Rome. I think this horse will make or at least be right up there. It's got form over a mile, loves soft ground. Team Ballydoyle are out of the doldrums. They're firing on all cylinders. This horse comes in here on a 4-timer. Ryan Moore be in the saddle. Yeah, Ancient Rome for me. I just think this will turn into a war of attrition, and I think he could just run them ragged and kind of run the sting out of Ebro River, and perhaps a couple of the others who arguably have a bit more of a turn of foot. So yeah, Ancient Rome for me to gallop them into submission.
All right, Ancient Rome from Ed. Let's move on to another Group 1, and this is for the fillies and mares. It's the Prix d'Opera. Run over 10 furlongs, and, we've got Grand Glory there at probably expecting around sort of 8 to 9 to 1 for Grand Glory. Ambition likely to take her place in the race. Thundering Knights is there for Joseph O'Brien. Udemania is also expected to take a place at a big price. Audaria for James Fanshawe, probably one of the favourites in the race. Then we've got iCat, Japanese-owned mare, will be at a big price. The brilliant Joan of Arc, who, we didn't see her to best effect last time out for Aidan O'Brien. Burgerita for Andre Farb's in the field. Palmas, another one to take a place for Andreas Vala. We wish Andreas well. Of course, he's recently had a heart attack, so we do certainly hope the great trainer will be there. Baby Lane's also in the field for Andre Farb. Roiger is also expected to take her place. Ziadar for Roger Varian. Jean-Claude Rouget with Penja. Sibylla Spain for Christopher Head. And in Carvel, a likely horse to take her place, probably at a big price. So 15 fillies and mares to take their place in the Prix d'Opera. Stephen, who do you like?
This does look another minefield, Shane. I must admit, I rang a pal about this race to ask what they'd laid, which is often a good guide. And the one they've laid is Parmas, that you've just touched upon. Unbeaten. Hasn't run on really testing ground yet, but I always think most of these German horses need, or certainly act well on heavy ground. So she'd be a token selection for me around about 6 to 1. I understand warm people have backed her, so she's likely to be running and she should go well. But this looks a real punting minefield.
A bit of a wide open affair, courtesy of Stephen. What are you doing with the race, Ed?
Well, obviously, Audaria is going to be pretty warm order in the market, and obviously only beaten a length in this last year by Tarnawa, which looks very good form, doesn't it? Just a suspicion she's not quite as good this season. It has to be said. I just thought around the 8 to 1 mark, Joan of Arc definitely has to come into the equation here. Clearly did not stay a mile and a half last time out. At a time when a lot of the Aidan O'Brien horses were, funny enough, it was in the race where Snowfall got beaten, and a few of the Aidan O'Brien horses were running kind of bemusingly flat races, if you like. Back to 10 furlongs. She's a class act. Ground will be no problem at all. She's encountered heavy ground twice in her life. She won on one occasion. On the other occasion was beaten the short head in the Irish 1,000 guineas in an absolute swab. She'll be fine on the ground, and she's nearly 4 times the price of the favourite. So yeah, Joan of Arc will do for me.
All right, Joan of Arc there in the Prix d'Opera. We might move on to the Prix de la Foret, which is over 7 furlongs, and we are likely to see Duhale go into this race for Andre Farb, probably at around the 8 to 1 mark. Njord will be there for Jessica Harrington, Kinross for Rafe Beckett, Current Option for Adrian McGuinness, Space Blues for Charlie Appleby, and Godolphin probably the favourite for the race. Entscheiden will also be in the field. Colosseo is expected to run. Erasmo is also expected to run. Rhythm Master for Richard Fahey. Thunder Moon for Joseph O'Brien will probably be around 16 to 1. Sagamira for Mikel Delzong at around 7 to 1. Tropbo for Andre Farb at a big price. Last Empire is also expected to run for Kevin Ryan. Pearl's Glory, another one in the field for the Toomey camp. Speak of the Devil for the Rossi camp, probably around the 12 to 1 mark. And Onassis for Charlie Fellows expected to be a big price. So likely to have a field of 16 for the Prix de Foret. Stephen, what's your view?
I like Duhale here, Shane. Farbra's. I think the key line of form is that run at Glorious Goodwood on the 28th of July when finishing 4th behind Alcohol Free. Didn't settle that day and ran an absolute blinder just behind Poetic Flair. It was a really, really solid run. This one's got loads of form in testing ground at Longchamp, and I think this 7 furlong trip will be ideal. That was over a mile at Goodwood. They tried 6 furlongs last time at Deauville, and watching that run back this morning, I think it did far too much too soon in the middle of the race, hit the front and then got picked off by a strong finisher. Back at 7 furlongs, heavy ground, around about 8 to 1. I think Duhale's sure to give you a run for your money.
All right, nice push for Duhale. Ed, what's your view for the 7 furlong feature?
Well, I know Team Godolphin have been conquering all this season. Space Blues, of course, won nicely last time out. I would be nervous about that individual on a very kind of testing track. A lot of that one's best form will come on what you probably call summer ground, it has to be said. Kid Ross is an individual we spoke about in the early part of the summer. I've always had in my note, but you can often pigeonhole these horses, and sometimes you get it totally wrong. But I think Kinross is very niche. In fact, Kinross wants 7 furlongs and very soft ground. Well, for that kind of layman's terms, Kinross is going to get exactly that on this occasion. Around the 6-1 mark, conditions will be fine. Doesn't quite stay the mile. 7 will be absolutely perfect here. And yeah, I don't know who's going to ride. I don't know if Crystal Sumion, I think, rode last time out, will be on the Rafe Beckett horse. But yeah, with conditions in that one's favour, Kinross would be my tentative selection in this assignment.
All right, Kinross there. And of course, the other Group 1 on the card is the Prix d'Abbé over 5 furlongs. We'll see the outstanding Suez Winter Powers also expected to be there. And Glass Slippers. Do you have a view, either of you two, on that race, Stephen? I think we've lost Stephen there. We'll come back to him shortly. Ed, your view on the Prix d'Abbé?
I was very tempted to put Swayzer in my tips for the week here, Shane. It was a bit of a coin toss at the end, and I've left her out. But more I look at it, I'm more kind of wishing I'd gone with her now, because she's unbeaten in France. She's an absolute machine on soft ground. Has come unstuck on a couple of occasions when travelling to these shores, including at York last time out. But if you compare 5 furlongs on the Knaves Mile on good to firm, compared to what she's going to race on Sunday. I mean, that is absolute chalk and cheese. She's in a backyard here, softer, heavy ground at Longchamp. I think she'll be much happier, and she's taken on a lot of fillies. I mean, put it this way, Winter Power absolutely pulverised her at York. I'd be shocked if that filly can kind of uphold that form on this ground and this track. This looks Swayzer's to lose. No funny business. There was a lot of criticism last time out about the ride on Swayzer, saying why was she given so much to do? I think William Buick basically said, look, she's just taken out of her comfort zone on the Knaves Mile and rattling quick ground. We couldn't go to gallop. Like I said, this is a totally different ball game, I think it has to be said. A bit like kind of grass and clay tennis. I know you're a big tennis fan, Shane. So yeah, it's a totally different surface, and I think Swayzer will take all the beating here. I know there's a lot of 11-4 knocking around earlier in the week. I doubt we'll see anything like that by the time they go to post.
Yeah, I think she's already into around 9-4. Stephen, good to have you back on the line with the Swayzer. Yeah. I know you've been a bit of a rap on this filly in the past. Do you think she is the one to beat in the Prix d'Abbé?
I think she's got standout form claims, Shane, and the key is there's loads of early pace here. I totally agree with Ed there. Winter Power, everything went right at her manor, York. This is completely different in heavy ground. There's a lot of contenders for the lead as well, which won't help. I think the only thing I'll say about Swayzer, I think as long as you're getting 2-1, it's basically that she sees daylight in the last 100 yards. She's going to be ridden to swoop late. The way she won at Goodwood, I thought was a top-class performance. Obviously, Batash was below par, and the ground was probably soft enough for some of them, but she was really impressive there. She was much, much, much the best. I think that was the best performance by a sprinter we've seen all flat season. I think this is her optimum condition. She was on the wrong side at York, as Ed has said. You just want 5-2. These sprints, Shane, very fine margins. A missed break, a checked run at halfway, and you're never going to make up the half length, the couple of lengths you've lost if it goes wrong. So I wouldn't want to go too short, but as long as you're getting bigger than 2-1, I think that's a fair price.
It's interesting for those tuning in for the first time to Paris Longchamp for the coverage. The 5 furlong course is a straight track down the actual back of the Longchamp course compared to where they'll race on the circle or the main track. So make sure you tune in for great coverage of racing on Sunday with the ARC meeting from Paris Longchamp. It's now time for the tips of the week. As we look ahead to some great racing this weekend, Stephen, let's reflect on your performance last week before we dive into who you like. Unfortunately, we struck out last week. You lost only 4 units for the weekend. Desert Dreamer missing out in the Cheveley Park. Fantastic Fox, unfortunately, in the Cambridgeshire handicap, not saluting. But your overall profit for the season still remains at a ridiculously healthy 62.5 units up. So, as we have a look at racing for this weekend, Stephen, who do you like?
Well, I've started with a couple of Ascot, Shane, in the 205, which is a listed sprint. I really like significantly here. All my calculations for the weekend ahead are on testing ground at Ascot. The weather forecast is diabolical in the south especially. I think it's going to ease dramatically. I think it's already good to soft, but I think it'll be heavy. Significantly, as a course and distance winner of a huge field handicap on heavy ground, Carl Burke is absolutely flying. He's had 9 winners in the last 14 days, 20% strike rate. This one's been ticking over in some warm races. I think everything looks ideal, provided the rain arrives. And if the rain arrives, there's a lot of these don't want soft ground. So significantly is around 7 or 6 to 1 at the moment. I think that's a price well worth taking. Staying at Ascot, the 350, a huge field heritage handicap over 7 furlongs. Similar thoughts here about Tom Frey. Not been at his best on decent ground the last twice at Ascot and Newbury in huge fields. But if you go back to York in May, the last time he got soft ground, he ran an absolute screamer in a hot handicap to finish second. He really does want testing ground. Rafe Beckett, another trainer going really well. 5 winners in the last 14 days. I think Tom Frey, Kingscote is a very good booking for this one. He's a good each way bet. Look for bookmakers offering extra places because it's a huge field. And the one we've touched on already, my third bet of the weekend, Suesa at Longchamp in the Abbey on Sunday. If she sees daylight, I think she'll win. You want at least 2 to 1, but I'm pretty confident that she's the nap of the weekend.
All right, so some good options there. Significantly, Tom Frey and Sueza there from Stephen. All right, Ed, it's your chance. Let's have a look at your performance last weekend. Just a marginal loss for you, -2 units, with Thistle Do Nicely and Masakila bombing out, but Art Power was able to get the result in the Renaissance Stakes, one of the features at the Curragh. So you're still also quite a healthy 9 units up for the season thus far. Let's focus on who you like this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, commiserations to Connections. Thistle Do Nicely actually suffered a fatal injury in that race. It was sad for the Jamie Snowden team and the mixed fortunes because he managed to bag a couple of winners later on in the car. But that's the way it goes. This week, tricky stuff. We've touched upon the in the Arc de Triomphe. I'm with Team Snowfall at the prices. I just think she's 6 to 1. She's the value pick, given she's looked invincible this season until it all kind of came unstuck in a muddling affair last time out. Only question mark I've really got about her is, will she handle real hop deep conditions? But she's performed pretty well with cutting the ground. I said the ground was soft enough the time she absolutely demolished them in the Oak. So I'm not too worried about that. I just think she's the value call with the 3-year-old and the sex allowance. So I think Snowfall, Ryan Mornboard's got to go well. And then in the Bengoff Stakes at Ascot, Glen Shiel. This horse drops into much calmer waters than what this horse has been used to, as running 4 consecutive Group 1s, drops into Group 3 here at Ascot. Horse has some terrific form at Ascot. Of course, won the Champion Sprint last year, was beaten a length when runner-up in the Diamond Jubilee at Royal Ascot. All this horse's best form on soft to heavy. I know it's officially good to soft there now. A lot of rain around. I can't imagine it's going to be much quicker than soft by race day, which, as I said, given the horse is 4 to 1, dropping down from a Group 1 to Group 3, has the best form in the book, conditions will be fine, and loves the track. I had the horse significantly shorter when I did the tissue. So, yeah, Glen Shiel for me. I think I'll go well. I'm looking for, Snowfall, the filly, to land the Arc on Sunday.
All right, Glen Shiel and Snowfall from Ed. And we haven't even focused on the Group 1 race that was coming up at Newmarket, the Sun Chariot. It's going to be a fantastic contest, Stephen. I mean, when you got the likes of Mother Earth, who was luckless last start, I still haven't forgiven her for being beaten on that occasion. Other top-class performers in Snow Lantern. We've also got Champs-Élysées. I mean, it's a ridiculously strong field, so it doesn't matter where you're looking this weekend, Stephen. You might be able to see some pretty special racing.
Yeah, I mean, Saturday's going to be overwhelming, Shane. There's 9 races from Longchamp, plus the usual barrage in the UK. You've got to pick your punches. I would say to punters, you can easily get drawn in. Us action junkies, there's a race off every 20 seconds, loads of them overlap. You can sort of lose your mind. I quite like to have a list of what I want to do and get it done, and then you avoid getting sucked into sort of your brain being fried by all the racing. Sunday's actually a really great 6 races, Paris Longchamp, all Group 1s. That's going to be fantastic. Let's hope Snowfall can bring home the raclette for us, Shane.
Looking forward to the invitation for cheese and wine, my friend. And Ed, as I mentioned with Stephen, so much quality all over the place. Is there anything that you're really looking forward to the most? No doubt it's the Arc.
Yeah, obviously the Arc is the absolute standout performance. National Hunt fan like myself, looking forward to seeing the likes of your Champion Chase winners back on the track. We'll put the kettle on her. You did touch upon the Sun Chariot there, Shane. Interesting one. Snow Lantern. I've been banging on, boring everyone silly. Said she needs a trick now. She needs 10 furlongs. It was quite interesting. Listen to Richard Hannon. He basically admitted. He said that I think she's a 10 furlong filly. But with the way the fillies and mares program is, I just think she could outclass them all over a mile. I think she's a vulnerable favourite there. I think she's there to be got. I'd love to have seen her over 10 furlongs. So I'm going to probably be pushing the lay button on Snow Lantern, especially if she goes shorter than 2-1. So anyway, lots to look forward to. Something for everyone definitely. But the Arc de Triomphe, come on Snowfall, absolutely buzzing for this. What a race.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. Good luck to the both of you. There we have it, Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley joining me here on Jump to It as they do each and every week. And hopefully we can find plenty of winners for you. You can also get plenty of winners by going to irishracing.com. Vincent and the team do a fantastic job. You get all of the form, news, opinion, betting information and tips for racing in Ireland, the UK, and also other selected meetings around the world. And of course, Stephen Harris's tips are available on bettingexpert.com each and every day. It's got his nap or his best bet, as well as his value selection for racing in the UK. Hope you've enjoyed today's edition of Jump to It. Good luck in the ARC meeting this weekend. We'll see you again very soon.